this video, we're going to learn about ratios. We're going to learn how to write ratios, and we're also going to learn how to determine if ratios are equivalent. So the first thing we need to know is, what is a ratio? A ratio is a comparative value of two or more quantities, and it can be written as 2:3, 2/3, or 2:3. An example would be, when you make a milkshake, you need 1 part milk to 2 parts ice cream. So to write that as a ratio, you'd write 1 milk to 2 ice cream. Here's our first example. We're going to take this sentence down here in blue, and we're going to write it as a ratio, and we're going to make sure that it's in simplest form. So the first thing that we need to do is read it. 3 drops of yellow to 6 drops of red. So this must be for mixing paint. And in order to get the right shade of orange, we need 3 drops of yellow and 6 drops of red. So here I see the number 3. And I'm going to write mine as a fraction. So I have the 3 written up here in the numerator, and I'm going to put the 6 down here in the denominator. And the directions said to write it in simplest form. So I would simplify. What goes into both 3 and 6? 3 does. So in simplest form, 3 goes into 3 once, and 3 goes into 6 2 times. So this sentence, written as a ratio in simplest form, will be 1 drop yellow to 2 drops red. There, we've written that as a ratio, and it's in simplest form. Here's our next example. We need to determine whether these ratios are equivalent. So 250 miles in 4 hours and 450 miles in 8 hours. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to write the first ratio. So I have 250 miles over 4 hours. And I need to determine if these are equivalent or equal. So I'm going to put an equal sign here. My first ratio I set up as miles to hours. So my second one I'm also going to set up the same way. 500 miles over 8 hours. Always like to go back and check. This is miles over hours. This is miles over hours. Now there are several different ways that you can go about solving these. I think one of the simplest ones is to use cross multiplication. So what we do is we look diagonally and we multiply these two things together. So I have an 8 and I have 250. So I'm going to multiply those together on one side of the equal sign. And I'm going to bring the equal sign down. And now I'm going to look diagonally the other way. And here I have 4 and 500. So I'm going to multiply those two together. And if these two things, if the number that we get on the left is equal to the number on the right, then these two things are equivalent. If they're not equal to each other, then that means that these two ratios are not equivalent. 8 times 250. Well, I know that 4 times 25 is 100, so that means 8 times 25 is 200, and if I add the 0, I'll get 2,000. And 4 times 500. Well, I know 2 times 500 is 1,000, so 4 times 500 must be 2,000. And these two are equal to each other, so since this is equal to each other, that means that these two ratios are equivalent. So over here, you'll just write yes. In order for you to have the answer yes, you also need to have the work proving that this really is equivalent. You can't just write yes or no that these are equivalent without having the work that goes along with them. Here's one more example for us. We have to determine whether these ratios are equivalent. We have 4 cups of flour to 8 cups of sugar and 8 cups of flour to 14 cups of sugar. So I'm going to write my first one, 2 cups, or excuse me, instead of writing cups of flour, I'm just going to write 2 flour to 8 sugar is equal to, and over here I have 8 flour and 14 sugar. So remember, we have to set them up the same way. So flour goes in the numerator. So 8 flour 14 sugar. And remember, we're going to look diagonally, so I'm going to look like this. And I see 14 times 2 is equal to, and I'm going to look the other way now. We have 8 times 8. 14 times 2 is 24, equal to 8 times 8 is 64. Those two things are not equal to each other, so that means that these two things are not equivalent. So the answer would be no. Remember, you have to have the work along with your answer of yes or no. And that's how we determine if ratios are equivalent, and that's also how we write ratios.